Oh, 5 o'clock, call the meeting to order at 5 o'clock. Was it February 5th, West Bridgewater Water Commission. You both had the chance to review the minutes.
I did.
I'll make a motion to approve and accept the minutes of January 16th.
And I will second same.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nope.
Warrants and abatements or actually no abatements. Warrants are all signed. John, you finished?
We did them all signed over there.
No abatements or refunds, and the commitment is signed.
Everything's signed, yep.
All right, we'll move into, jump one thing and then get right into you, James.
Sounds great, thank you.
Just the first bullet item under old, the ZBA decision was, that's just still in process, so there's nothing to report for that, right? And now we'll have Mr. James Hoyt of Tata and Howard. We'll go down the list and you can give us the project status on each one, or do you have a?
No,
What do
perfect.
you like
Some of
to
them
say?
are pretty lengthy updates, so you guys can tell me if I'm going too deep or if you want me to go deeper, but there's been a lot going on, so I'm sure a lot we can catch up on.
All right, which do you think would be easier to, want to do Manley Street first and then get into the other, or?
Yes, that one's further along.
Okay, we do Manley Street, Station 3.
Yeah, so Manley Street, I think at this point, we have all of our ducks in a row for the final DEP inspection. I know, Wayne, you're just waiting on the report from the cross-connection survey.
I will call him tomorrow.
Okay.
Harass him.
And then that's kind of the only thing keeping us from getting that short-term online. We've done our inspection, we've done our certification, we've done all of our paperwork. I think we had originally lined DEP up, but then we had another inspection elsewhere, and this region is pretty strict that they want all of these things signed, sealed, and delivered when they show up. They don't want to hear, oh, all we have left is these two things. Can you give us a conditional approval? So that's why we kind of pulled back, reached out to Wayne and said, let's get these, last couple things buttoned up so we don't have to have them out, then be frustrated, have the laundry list, and have to get them back out. So that's kind of where we're at with the short term. We have all of our things complete, so as soon as we get that last piece.
Now, has the cross-connection survey been done?
Yeah,
He
he found a couple.
he just hasn't given you anything.
Right, he found a couple of things, we switched them out, even though there are things we'll probably put back in later, we'll just cap them so that they can't be a future item.
We just, whenever that gets in, then you can schedule
Yep,
inspection, we can get that thing.
I'll harass him tomorrow.
So then on the long term, we essentially had two approvals going on simultaneously. So we had the administrative approval of our application, so to speak, our loan application to the SRF program. And so they essentially sent us a conditional approval of that, awaiting the technical review, which is that second piece we had going on simultaneously, which is the technical review of our plans and specifications for the long-term upgrades. So I'm thinking we're getting close. It's been a while, right? We submitted those back in October, and then we've provided supplemental information in, I think, December 6th. So it's been in their court for a while, but I got an interesting email from DEP asking for some clarification. I think they were confused between the short-term and the long-term approval. And so then we answered that question, and it triggered her to call me and ask some follow-up. So I get the impression that that's because she's going through our package.
It's a good sign.
Right.
Yeah, at least it's being looked at as opposed to just sitting.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of on the borderline of, like the tiptoe, that line of like checking in on things but not being obnoxious.
Right.
So that was a good sign, and we'll follow up, probably in a week if we haven't heard, saying, do you have questions on anything else or anything else we can help, with your review. But when we reached out to Jim McLaughlin the last time, he was essentially like, please, coordinate directly with your reviewers. So in the past, he's been the one we've kind of called, and he's got things in motions, but this time around, he was more like, go through the typical avenues, please. So anyway, I think progress will be made. I think the only thing we have on our kind of radar outside of any comments that might come out of their review, and we do anticipate there'll be some things that come out of the review. We'll incorporate those in the documents and get them out to bid at that time with their approval. But we had sent over, I think, some plans and specs, and I just didn't know if any of you have had an opportunity to look at them, or if you will, or if you're gonna have additional comments, we should,
Well,
Plan on
I sent you an
seeing.
email that we learned when we loaded that media, which I know you guys haven't seen the media. This is it.
That's the
That's
green,
why I said you don't want to try to save it, because it's basically a grain of sand or less, but it removes the PFAS down to zero
that's the
currently.
green sand.
So that's not green sand. This is the
That's
fluorosorb.
Fluorosorb.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's an absorptive media.
Right.
It's the magic dust that takes the PFAS.
But when we loaded that, we had to reverse and forward flush that. I don't know if you paid attention to that email.
Yes.
Like our filters weren't set up, but the things that he made us remove are the things that we want to put back on so that they're there, because we.
I see. Okay. I didn't connect those dots, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, so I don't know if it's the new filters, if that took into account connections.
So the new vessels are specifically designed for this application. So if you look, I forget what sheet it is, but we have a valve tree sheet, and essentially, if you were to compare that to the process flow diagram at the front of the set, it'll show you that we have the ability to send the water 8 different ways. And I think we have even a table that shows you open valve, closed valve, to see all the ways we can route it. And that's one of them, is that, that really only happens on a media change. So I know it was kind of a headache on this one, but in a perfect world, you're never doing that in your existing building ever again. All future media replacements will be just in the new building, is our hope, right?
By the time that's going, we should hopefully.
Yeah, we're expecting,
Awesome.
2 years life out of the media. So at a minimum, it could be better. So by the time that media is ending its, life, we should be, well on our way with the long-term improvements, right? We have to award that contract by June 30th because of the SRF funding. So we don't think it's a multi-year construction project. A year and a half, maybe.
As long as the things can be, get here. We've had that
There's,
issue.
yeah, I know,
recently.
right? Right. VFDs deciding to take
Yeah,
2 years to show up. I understand.
Yeah, I'm still waiting the PLCs. I think he's gotten a couple. I ordered them more than a year ago. So, there are still things that you go to get and they're not there. But we did get the results back, or the conditional letter, and it talked about the use of the just chlorine versus using the permanganate in it. It looked like we're still gonna use permanganate.
So we don't think it's necessary. So we'll have to respond to that comment. It was in our piloting.
Yeah.
So the piloting was done and showed that we had acceptable oxidation without the need of permanganate. But that being said, the current design is structured so that if you needed to add permanganate down the road,
Yeah.
we have left a portion open to put those in place. So we didn't think it was, as you know, budget is a constraint on all of these projects, and we have a construction estimate, and we aim to go out to bid with anticipating bids to come in within, our estimates. Otherwise, it causes headaches. So we have to be careful in terms of how much we add to a design during design. So that's one of those things where the pilot test showed that the hypo is going to adequately oxidize so that we get the removal we need for iron and manganese without the need to use permanganate. We're changing the media from green sand to green sand plus, and the typical application is to not need permanganate in those systems. So I think Blue Leaf wouldn't go so far as to guarantee at full scale down the road it would never be needed. And so that's why we set up our design so that if you needed to add permanganate down the road, we've shown essentially on a plan where that can go.
Yeah.
So I think that's something we'll continue to talk to DEP about.
I mean, at best we use a pallet, which I think is like 48 pails. It's not a lot.
So
but if we don't have to use it,
Yeah.
one less thing to deal with, one less chemical to
Right,
pay
it's
for.
one less chemical.
and As long as, like you said, you get the space there that we, if we had to, we can use it. That would be better, cover
Right.
it there, rather than have to add it in into the bid.
Exactly. We're not just crossing our fingers and hoping it doesn't show up. We're prepared for if it does. But we stopped one step short of just buying it all just in case, because construction costs go up year over year, and we're constantly having our cost estimates chasing those numbers year over year, because you do your cost estimate in 2023 for what you think it's going to cost in 2024. And you assume a certain level of escalation in costs, and it's a constant race.
You
So-
don't wanna be the low bidder.
We don't want to be the low bidder.
Now, we're gonna come in and go out through the PFAS, so are we gonna be running, you said injecting on the backside of the building. Honestly, I haven't looked at them yet. I can't catch a moment to breathe, but. So are we gonna run a new pipe out to the street alongside and connect back into the existing pipe?
No. So when you do look at them, one thing to look for is on the back of your existing building, you're going to have this little hut kind of attached. And so essentially what we're doing is we're sending the treated water to our new building. We're doing our PFAS treatment. We're bringing it back. Now we're calling it PFAS treated water.
Yeah.
And it comes into your building. So essentially it comes up out of ground behind your building. So we have a little hut to keep it, from freezing. Coming in and then going out, because we want to inject chemicals in your existing building. Otherwise, we're adding chemical addition to the other building, which triggers different code requirements. And now we have to have tempered water for showers and eye wash. Whereas right now we don't need any of that. It's just a building that houses vessels and some lights.
I was just hoping to correct, when they built the plant, they didn't take into account when you're getting it ready to go and qualifying, we have to race across the street, close gates, open gates. It's a lot of, you're paying Frogger going across that street, trying to get it going, because if you don't trigger it right, you trigger a backwash. Now you're stuck for an hour and a half in backwash, because there's no way to stop a backwash. I was just hoping that we would have, and we'll do it at a later date, we'll add on a hydrant on our side and a feed line to keep the plant up to pressure.
We did add a hydrant. Look at the location and see if you'd rather us locate it differently. Because we essentially tie in at that same point now. So we're grabbing it when it leaves the building, rerouting it, and then putting it back on the other side of where it's leaving the building. So
I'll look at it before.
yeah, just take a look at that. Because that's easy for us to reconfigure slightly if we're overlooking some operational headache you have existing. We may not have addressed that headache.
Right, well, you wouldn't know, we know, because
Yeah.
every time we do something.
I think the only other thing I had on that, which obviously you guys ask as many questions you want before I change the subject, but we talked about maybe getting that in front of the planning board and seeing if they.
I spoke with you, he said basically, when you go before, it's basically a rubber stamp. It's not, he didn't see anything that stood out to him that would say no.
Okay.
So, when you think you're ready, we'll get you on their agenda.
Okay. So I think as soon as we have your blessing on them, that's when we would move. That way,
All right.
we'd like this kind of moving in parallel to the DEP, so that it's not like, oh, we finally have DEP approval. Now let's run and try to get all the town approvals. So again, I know, we sent you a hard copy and it takes,
Yeah,
and it's
I
a
brought
lot.
him down and had him look at it. He's really good.
Okay. Perfect. So yeah, once we get, I guess,
I'll try to get it.
your
off.
blessing, the board's blessing on the plans, then, we'll ask you to help us schedule that.
Yeah.
Or we can just reach out directly if that's the protocol.
Yeah.
Anything else PFAS?
One question that came up when we were doing budgets, but you're saying the floor absorber is gonna last 2 years, or probably a couple of years from putting it in, so years down the road. Do you have any idea what the cost is to get rid of that? Because it's gonna be hazardous waste, right, with the PFAS?
Let me look. I feel like we did do a review of the life cycle costs back when we did it. I just off the top of my head, I don't remember how the new media purchase and the disposal breaks out,
Okay.
but I'm sure we have that that information in-house. Let me just jot that down and follow up with you on that. Because I believe that was part of the analysis we did, that, as you know, we were not going to pilot everything under the sun. So we were looking at carbon, we were looking at ion exchange, we were looking at fluorosorb. So in order to advise, we did do like a life cycle cost on all of those. So, I can follow up. And again, I think the 2 years is like a conservative estimate based on them. We'll know for sure the first time we see breakout at one of our sample ports. So in the vessel we're using at the existing plant, we have strategically placed sampling ports so that we can capture, breakthrough at the first tap. That would be breakthrough at like 30% of the media. And so the first time, we hit that point, we'll be like, okay, well, we've used a third of the media's life, essentially at that sample point. Then at the 50% tap, when we hit that, we know we're at half-life. And, it should be linear, assuming that the media life is significantly longer than any seasonal variation you have, right? So if you're burning through media quickly, you could see that not be linear, because your spikes in seasonal are showing up that way. But at 2 years, going through multiple, you should have a pretty good linear, trend, so to speak, so that, certainly by the time you hit the third sample port, you'll know.
Be able to predict it a little bit.
Yeah, to say it took us 6 months to get to sample port 1, it took us another 6 months, so we're halfway through our media, it's been a year. We now know we should plan on replacing our media before a year is up. Right? And hopefully it's twice as big as the example numbers I just gave.
Anything else for James on Manley Street?
No, good job.
Do you want to pivot to Sear Street?
I would give it to Sear Street.
Okay, I have some gifts. We can look at some
Gifts?
things. Yeah.
Beware of consultants bearing gifts.
Well, there are two parts to it, and I think the green sand part is pretty intuitive at this point. You guys are green sand pros, but when we get into the organics, it's a little bit more obscure. So I just printed out this figure for reference. So I guess starting with the green sand piece, as you know, we did a pilot study which wrapped up, and we got the consultant's report back last month. So we went through our initial review, we kicked some things back to the consultant, here are our questions, here are our comments, had a follow-up call. We now have everything we need in-house to finish that pilot report. And so our plan would be to have that ready for your review, at some point before the end of February. And then once you're okay with it, we have to send that to DEP for approval. So the pilot study consisted of really 3 steps. And so the first step was iron and manganese removal. And if you recall, about halfway through the biologicals piloting, we were seeing it was working, but it wasn't at the efficiency we would expect for that technology. And so that indicated to us that our application wasn't the best fit for biological, but if we had to, we could have used it. But around that time, we started to realize that some of the discoloration that we were getting in the water was not the result of manganese, it was the result of color. It was a result of organics. So what we chose to do is kind of pause on the piloting of biological. It didn't seem like it was going to be the best solution, and use the budget we would have spent finishing that to tackle this color and organics issue. So put that kind of aside, we continue on with green sand plus piloting. And so this is the good news coming out of the pilot. That worked as we anticipated. Green Sand Plus is going to be a good fit for this application in terms of iron and manganese. Our pilot report's going to say as much that, we have our loading rates that we're going to design on. So at the end of our pilot, you'll see our recommendation is going to be to design Green Sand Plus at, X loading rate to achieve the removal we need there. So then if we kind of pivot to the organics piece, piloting showed it's a little bit more stubborn than the iron and manganese were. So we initially tried what we hoped would be good news, which is coagulation, right? Instead of adding complex treatment to remove organics, maybe we can coagulate enough out that we're not worried about disinfection byproducts, and we can knock down the color to within, the guidelines. And unfortunately, we got to a dosage that was unviable, and we still hadn't quite got to where we needed. So that was kind of our sign that coagulation wasn't the way to go. So then finally, we piloted with MyX. And so MyX is a resin, and it is effective at removing organics. So it's interesting. We're doing two different systems right now, two different waters, if you will, raw water sources, and piloted MyX there first, and their pilot actually came here. So we have twice the data at our disposal to kind of see. And what we found was MyX worked here. I'll get into how well it worked in a second, but it worked better there. So again, it's showing that the color issues and the organics issues we have here are pretty stubborn. So the short version is, if we move forward with MyX, we would treat just the sear wells that have the organic issue. To scale it up to have our entire treatment plant treat would be cost prohibitive. So we're looking at this point strictly a side stream process where we're treating just the sources that have organics and color, and everything else would bypass that treatment, go straight into, the Green Sand Plus treatment. So that's one of the things you can kind of see here. I know this is missing well 4 and 5. I didn't have time to get them to update the figure before I came. But essentially they would be on the same leg as, Norman well. And so if I'm going too in the weeds, feel free to tell me to pump the brakes.
You're doing fine.
But when we looked at the MyX removal, we assumed, they call it 1,500 contact beds. So, and this is our regeneration rate. So unlike a carbon where you use up the media and you ditch it, you're taking a resin, and as it's, being used up, you're regenerating it with a brine mixture. And that's kind of what, kind of showing here is we have our contactors, which is where our organic treatment is taking place. And then coming out of there is our effluent, which is our, TOC removed effluent going into the rest of our treatment. And then the side stream is going down to our MyX regen, and you'll see another arrow coming back up. So as we're taking kind of the, we're taking that out, we're regenerating its effectiveness, reactivating sites is kind of how we call it, so that it's available for TOC removal.
Is that done as a backwash, or is it just a drip feed going in?
No, so this is literally a closed loop system. So it's, the amount you're pulling out and you're putting back in is dependent on how quickly the media is being used up by removing TOC. So in our case, what we found at the standard 1,500 contact bed is that we were getting just better than a 50% TOC removal. We were getting good color removal. So color, thumbs up. TOC, but at that 50%, if you were to just run that water, you would be borderline on whether you would have the potential to create disinfection byproducts. So in this case, the HAA5, so the helioacetic acids, that's the one that is a little bit worse in terms of what byproduct is going to be, potentially forming in the distribution system. And it's right on the cusp, like closer than we would like. However, if we can say we're never running just those well by themselves, they'll always be blended with at least Norman or one of the other SEER, then that would be adequate treatment. If we wanted to design such that running that alone, you would have no concerns about disinfection byproducts, we would have to regenerate our media more often, and what that's going to mean for you is higher salt costs because you're buying salt for your makeup tank more often, and then your disposal costs go up. So one of the headaches of this system is that you are, constantly purchasing salt. You have a saturation tank essentially to create the brine, and then what comes off of your regen system, there's just no good where to put it. Like even if you had an in-town treatment like wastewater plant, unless you're talking multi-MGD plant, they probably would be hesitant to take this brine waste. And in our climate, drying beds just aren't going to cut it. We don't have a long enough drying season where we can store during the winter and dry. So it's just a straight up hauling operation at that point. You'd have a tight tank where all that brine waste goes. We hopefully size it to have a 30-day capacity, and then you're paying, essentially $1 a gallon to get rid of it. So I guess now we'll talk numbers. So we asked the manufacturer of MyX for a cost proposal for a 1 MGD system. So this would be to treat just SEER 1 and 2. They have a permitted capacity of 1.01 MGD. So we technically would probably size it for 1.01 MGD, but for all intents and purposes, 1 MGD, because that's what they call it's kind of like their threshold between systems.
But that's much more than we actually pump through.
Yeah, it's permitted for 1 million gallons a day, but it can't produce that.
Right. Which that's going to be a topic we're going to talk about in a second. But that's a capital cost for just this treatment system of $1.9 million is just to get their system on site. That doesn't include if we have to modify our building to make it larger to house this. Doesn't include if we have to do additional piping than we would have done anyway. And then the other piece, and I'd like to just offer that these are moving targets. We're talking preliminary design at this stage because we just finished piloting. But as you know, we have to do a certain amount of due diligence so you know how to move forward. So our preliminary estimates are it could be up to $250,000 a year in operation costs. And that doesn't include any training or labor for Wayne and his staff to operate this system on top of green sand. So, as you can see,
Any good news?
so
Yeah, it's
We
about
hope
half
so.
$1 million a year.
So I don't mean to be doom and gloom, but I want to lay it all out there so that the next part of my conversation makes sense. And that is that we've asked Wayne to do a whole battery of water sampling for us.
And I pulled the dissolved and I pulled the total. They went into the lab last week.
Perfect. And the reason we did that is because I think we need to take a harder look on source management and blending. So, as you know, like if we were to blend that raw water, the TOC, is a mass, right? So blending does effectively dilute it. Color is a little bit different. It's not, color isn't necessarily mass. So if you take, 100 gallons of one color and 100 gallons of zero, it doesn't make 0.5, right? So it's a little more complicated to project out just on like a tabletop study. But one of the things we want to do is figure out, are both of our SEER wells, so 1 and 2, are they both giving us color and carbon? Because we've never sampled them individually. All of our piloting and our sampling has been the combined output. So for all we know, one well has these issues and the other doesn't. So at some point, if we take a look at that, it's a different thought process. Like now we're not treating 1 MGD. We have one well, I think that's permitted for 0.3 and one that's permitted for 0.7, more or less. So if all of your color is in well 0.3 and we know the other well is fine, there may be more cost-effective ways to handle this than treat it. I don't want to go into a million hypotheticals, but one is you abandon the well, right? If it's just the lower producing well that has it, you abandon it. You could do a replacement well and hope that if you move the 50 feet towards the well that isn't a problem, maybe that gets you far enough away where it's not, right? So there are all of these things, but kind of the first step for us is finding out if both wells are a problem or if it's just one, and whether we think we can do source management and blending and avoid MIX altogether.
Should we go to the VFDs now?
We're gonna start on the replacement well now, after the last one. The $250,000 a year, we were talking about operating costs, that's assuming you were running 1 million gallon a day through it,
Correct.
so that number is.
That would come down.
Way over what would actually,
Yeah.
if we did have to get into it, but it's still.
What would you say you're
Safe
actually,
yield out of that is probably 250 gallons a minute.
with both wells?
Yeah, I've never, because we rehabbed it in 2017 and
Since-
switched it over,
Yeah.
and the minute I turned it on, that's when I got complaints. And no matter what we did trying to blend it, the complaints, that's when it got shut down.
So I think that might be the difference in assumption, and maybe you can help us out there. So our thought process is if the limitation is water quality and not pumping rate, then a big reason why we're investing all of this treatment is to improve the water quality where that's not limiting your production. Is that a good assumption for
I
us to
haven't
be
been able to
starting?
run it to see what my drawdowns would be.
I see.
I mean, I can run it to waste with back pressure and see, and then watch the drawdowns and see what happens.
Maybe that's step 2. Maybe let's get the water quality and look at what our blending options are. And then maybe that's another test we can run afterwards. Because that's true. I don't want to oversize, an expensive treatment system. So, that's something we have to look into. And a lot of these numbers we will further refine if we get into the point where we're designing this process. I think at this point, we're kind of treading the line of making sure we vetted this well enough that we can make recommendations for how you should act, but not design something that will never actually be built.
Now, does adding the MIX in change the treatment treatment operator level?
That's a good question. I'll have to look. Yeah, I'm not sure. That's a good question. The other application I mentioned already is a higher level than you are, so.
Oh, the first one that we kind of threw out.
Yeah, they're surface water, which is where you normally run into these organics issues, is surface waters. It's a little bit more unique in groundwater. So I don't think that was necessarily one of their considerations, but that is a consideration here.
Of that $250,000 a year for 1 million gallons a day, how much of that is the MIX?
So that's all MIX.
That's all?
It's a combination of the electric usage, the purchasing of salt, and the disposal of spent brine.
Okay, so that doesn't include KOH or green sand?
Nope, that's all separate. This is just focusing in on the MIX piece.
Okay.
And to be fair, I don't think we've even run those numbers for you yet.
No, this is just on top of whatever it is we need to pay to keep the sources running.
Yeah. So that's what I have on that one.
What's your schedule going forward?
So,
Assuming we get, how long to get the samples to the lab
Usually
results?
about 3 weeks.
About 3 weeks?
but that being said, I don't think we're changing the overall size of the green sand plant, right? We still want the ability to treat all of the sear in the Norman well.
Yeah.
And again, that does help us in terms of if we go to a blending plan and we treat sear 1 and or 2, depending if they're both equal. If for now, if we assume they both equally contribute color, you know, we would shift those to more as a supplemental source. So, you know, you already have Manly, it's gonna have PFAS, it's gonna have green sand. That's gonna be maybe your primary source. And then, you know, secondary, you'd be looking at using SEER 4, 5, and Norman. And you'd really only be then turning wells 1 and 2 on when water demand requires them, or just every once in a while to keep them, you know, operational. And, you know, under those scenarios, you know, you try to run as many other wells as you can when you're running that, to do that blending analysis. When we do the blending analysis, you know, we're hoping we can show that you're not at high risk for disinfection byproducts.
And the MIX doesn't care if you don't run it for a month, or 2 months, or 3 months, and then turn it on?
No, it would. So if we're talking about not using them, like saving them for an emergency source, that would be because we've opted not to invest in MIX.
Okay, well, not just to use it as little as possible to keep the costs down, but.
I mean, that is also an option. It would keep your annual costs down, but you know, it is still a capital expense that was not included in your SRF application. So it's an additional expense beyond what you've allocated funds for.
So, I mean, currently a safe yield, I think, is about 360,000 gallons a day out of it.
So that's significantly less than we've done all our calculations. So that's I guess part of the equation too. You are looking at potentially derating the source if we don't design to the permitted capacity, but I don't know if that's really a long-term concern for you.
I don't know how it ever got up that high a number. It used to be vacuum source wells and 50 plus motors, and I don't know how they got to that number. Rick used to argue for higher numbers all the time, and that's probably how it happened.
I mean, it's possible that they got that approval when they permitted the test wells, but the production wells could never live up to it.
Right.
I mean, it's very common for you to look at a test well and think you've found the best source on the planet, and then you go and your production well isn't quite the promise.
Well,
Doesn't quite live up to the promise.
We rehabbed in 2017, there were vacuum wells, they're sealed, so we couldn't see into them when they opened them up. It was truly the best source you could have in town, till we discovered that the vacuum wells were packed full of sand. We were literally cleaning the water as we were vacuuming it in. Once we removed that, that's when we ran into the issues.
Yeah, just have to filter it. Yeah, so I guess just to put a bow on that, we're moving forward with the pilot test proposal, getting that into DEP, because that's on our critical path timeline. So we're still gonna get that wrapped up here in February, into you for review. If everything looks good, submit it to DEP. We're still moving forward with the design of the green sand plant. You know, we're being a little bit careful in terms of, you know, we can't design a foundation yet, because if the building size goes up or down, based on MIX, we don't want to be doing things twice. It's inefficient use of budget. And then I guess the last piece is just getting that water quality to make sure that we have color in organics, and also start to kind of shine the light on what PFAS looks like. Because then that's going to be another, you know, complicated conversation to say, maybe by 2026, 2028, we're going to be seeing new PFAS regulations. And we know right now that these sources meet the current regulations. The next set of regulations are expected to be more stringent. So does that mean we have, I mean, I don't think at this point there's any budget to just put PFAS treatment in just in case, you know, what's needed in 4 years. But maybe we size the building And we have knockout panels so that if you have to put PFAS in, your cost is the vessels and the piping, not what we're doing at Manly. It's like all this yard piping, a satellite building, maybe we try to spend a few pennies now to save some bucks down the road.
No, at a minimum, we should at least have it planned out to add the vessels, because if we don't, guaranteed the week after the regs come out, our numbers will go up.
Yeah, fair enough.
So, I mean, we're not gonna pay for the units unless they change the regs quicker, but,
Right.
I mean, that's making sure there's enough space, we might as well.
Yeah. I mean, there usually is like a 5-year compliance timeline too. So when they drop the regs, even if it is as early as 2026, theoretically, you almost always have 5 years to come into compliance.
When are they gonna make me start sending letters out though? That's one
Oh,
thing.
see that-
nasty.
Day one.
And that's basically the thing, just because the state, once the word gets out, people get scared by it, and they're gonna want the treatment going in, and I wouldn't wanna be the one standing up saying, why we need to build a whole new building over here now, and, we didn't plan on that right before.
Sure. Yep, there are certainly benefits.
I mean, it needs to be planned for, we can try to limit the other side of it with the MIAX as much as, the PFAS is there. It's we're gonna have it no matter what with these, so we might as well have the ability to at least turn it around and do something with it.
Right. So Wayne, I think, is going to sample for PFAS for us too, just so we can see which of the components there are, because traditionally we've only, sampled for the regulated 6, and part of the new regulations is to expand which, compounds we're keeping an eye on and what we're considering, bad. So that will help us with that decision making, kind of do that. I mean, it's all risk assessment at this, right? That's all it is. It's, you want to do right because it's the right thing to do, but you also have, permit drivers, and you have moving goalposts, and it's a complicated issue. So we want to help you be as prepared as possible, I guess.
There's little extra to do after the fact, is, the plant laid out with the piping so that stuff can be added, room to add things that we need. But yeah, especially with the operating, everything else, we don't want to be spending any more than we actually have to.
Understood. So all that's still moving forward while we kind of simultaneously work with Wayne to figure out the organics piece. But I can rerun the numbers. We've essentially modeled what your plant would look like, but it was based on 1 MGD. So if we update the flow, then that's going to be, both reduced capital and operational costs. So anything else on the Sear Norman site?
Will you have that ready for us to look at the next meeting? Do you want our blessing
On the pilot report?
on what needs to go to DEP next?
Yeah, so do you have the next one scheduled?
Kerry?
Yep.
It's a holiday.
I think it's a Tuesday.
The 20th. Two weeks.
Okay.
And that fits your time. I don't want us to be holding, you up. You want our
Sure.
approval, say to go and send it in, so.
Yeah, I mean, I was told it'll be in my review by the end of this week, the report. So I don't think we've introduced you guys to Anthony yet, but we've brought Anthony on board as a treatment specialist, because we have a number of treatment projects going on. So he's helping out with writing that pilot report so that our team can continue to push forward design. So it's coming to me for my review next. It's been pretty collaborative anyway, so I'm expecting it to be in pretty good shape.
Okay.
But as we add on to these projects, we're bringing additional staff in Because as you know, we have hard deadlines on all of these to meet our funding goals.
Well, and that's the thing, I don't want it to be where suddenly we can't look at something, get it back to you in time, but we're the holdup, but I also want us to be able to have the time to look at it, not just.
Well, that's the thing. So we're gonna aim for it. I'll shoot Wayne an update once I talk to the team and see, certainly we can have it submitted to you by the 20th, but I don't know if we're getting it to you a week before the 20th, because that's a week from today.
Yeah.
So, it's possible that we'll have it in, and I'm here in 2 weeks to talk about it, but at that point, I doubt we've given you enough time to read it before I come.
When
So,
is the date you need our decision by to get it into DEP?
I would think the following board meeting would be the latest we'd want to go. So, let me meet with the team, and I just don't want to tell you one thing now and not live up to it. So I'd prefer to go back, see what's the most realistic early date we can give you, and then communicate that to you, and hopefully, it's early enough for you guys to digest it before next meeting.
And then you'll come to the next meeting, we can go over it.
Yeah.
Because again, I don't want, it's a lot of money potentially at stake, I don't want us missing deadlines.
Understood, 100%.
You asked for the title. I
So-
need to know where it's going.
Yes, I understand. So that we sent you everything we're gonna need. That's due in October.
All right.
So I know
Well,
we may have
It took a long
been,
time last time to get the last one.
which is why we started the process early,
Yeah.
but I think we're kind of waiting to get our footprint nailed down,
All right.
because I think we have a general idea. We want to put the plant up on the hill, and we want to put the lagoons down in the sand pit. So it's just but that's not all one parcel, right? So you have a couple different parcels. So I don't know. So I think we owe that to you before you can actually follow.
All right.
So I think
I'll
we may have
continue on the samples then.
we may have been a little bit over eager when we asked you for that.
But they don't need that till October, so that should.
Yeah, it's just last time I know town hall, had a bunch of stuff they had to sign, and it took us probably, I don't know, a month and a half to get all of that stuff coordinated. So I think one of the lessons learned was let's ask for it before August, if we know it's due in October. And in this particular case, one of the things we asked for is really not in your court, it's in our court, so.
Anything else for?
Yeah, was that not enough?
Well, it's a lot, but
A lot of money.
if something pops into your head now, it's a better time to ask than to wait.
No, I
till the next
100%
time.
agree. We have other topics to cover too.
So if we can get not to need that MIAX one way or the
Oh,
other,
yeah.
that's
Yeah.
what. And that, right now, and again, that 1.9 million for the unit isn't in the funding.
Right,
So that would be,
because that came
either
up.
would have to beg them to add it, or we'd be paying that out of pocket.
Yeah, we'd probably want to, as soon as we think, if we thought we were going to go down that path, we'd want to start engaging them immediately to see what is the opportunity for additional funding through the SRF program.
But hopefully we can avoid it. Next.
Okay, so there's the lead service project. I don't know if that's the next on your list. But essentially,
I know you said something, but I really haven't had time to read it.
that's okay. So what I tried to do is show stepwise how the reimbursement works. And I'm hoping that if you can even just forward that to whoever you think might be misunderstanding, or maybe they do understand and there are legitimate concerns that we don't understand. It could be that as well. But this is happening in dozens of communities across the board where it is a grant. There is no need for an appropriation as part of the structure of the grant. We provide the service on a pay us when you get the funds basis. So essentially, you have no match. You have an account that's set up through the program, and we submit a reimbursement form with our invoices, and then once they approve it, they disperse the funds directly into your account, and at that time you pay us. So, you know, we have no problems waiting for you to get paid before we get paid. And, you know, so I think some of the concern was, you know, what you had to do vote-wise, but,
Was that concern from town hall?
So I'll delicately say that it takes a higher level to get it pushed. When I went to the When I went to the higher level, I don't think you wanted to put the time in. When I went to the lower level, she wasn't gonna be bothered. She just said outright no. I'll try again and try to address both ends together, maybe get them in a meeting together with whatever you sent. I'll read over whatever you sent first.
and we're happy to meet with anybody you'd like us to
Right.
meet with. If it helps for us to be in a room and explain it, like I said, we're doing it in dozens of communities, so, you know, we know what we're talking about in this regard.
Right.
And what I'd hate to have happen is like that October deadline isn't going away whether you go for the grant or not. So eventually you're gonna be on the hook for all of it, because it's,
We're currently going to send out mail-out postcards to the residents with the QR codes. It's all set up and ready to go. We've tested it numerous times, the survey online, it's there, we've posted it up on the website, but we're hidden behind everything. We really need our own website where we can put stuff up front, not be hidden in town halls. There's nothing wrong with it, but we're buried. So we can't flash anything, we can't, you know, we're so far embedded that nobody sees it.
I understand, yeah.
And at some point, I might ask the commissioners, I mean, we have a lot of talented individuals in town, and maybe just get somebody to give us a cost to set up a website for us, and then the cost to house it, and, you know, pick the best out of, you know, somebody here in town to do it. It's not, I've looked at it as HTML coding and stuff, it's not difficult, but there are people out here that have the time to do that, and they know it better than I would. And they could set it up for us and, you know, do it cheaply. And, you know, if they get to put their name on it, maybe we get it cheaper, you know, I don't care. It's just that we need to be unburied, we're too far in. And when we need to do something, we have to go steps to get things posted, which, I mean, they do it, but it's the time it takes to do it. Like if we're working in a street and we can flash it instantly, it's that much better. There's a banner there flashing away saying, hey, we're doing something. And you might see, so, you know, people will be more apt to go look. I know you're working on the communications, and if that something comes of that, this is just another step in that direction. Communication is key to everything.
Right, yeah, we've been meeting,
Yeah, okay, that's what
she's
I'm
on the
focused
committee as
to.
well, and a lot of the vendors that we're talking to have tools that we can use for those sorts of things.
The biggest issue though is like, you know, say something happens and then, you know, by the time it gets out, like the residents don't know in time. So they call panicked, it's like 50 calls and it's like, and then they get, you know, upset, rightfully so, how come we weren't notified? And it's a huge, you know, I can't answer all the calls and then they're like, well, you're not answering the call, but I'm answering them one at a time. And there's gotta be an easier way for us to get the message to them that this is happening.
Yeah.
This is why you don't.
We had the break on Saturday. We were up there for 16 hours and the water was off for that long. We had no way to tell anybody because, you know, other than notifying the fire department, you might get calls.
Where was the break?
It was down on North Main Street.
I was out of water for those 16 hours.
So you live in that section.
Yeah,
But I don't
right
mind, I have the phone, like I have the work cell phone, so if it rings in the office and nobody's here, like I'll answer it, and I answer it all, you know, all the time on the weekend, and I don't have a problem with that, but it's just, there's gotta be a better way to get.
Yeah, there definitely is better ways.
Truly, within 30 minutes of that being called in, I found it.
Yeah,
Of course, within 30 minutes of that, you didn't have water anymore.
exactly. Thankfully, I am on top of it, so I do pay attention to that. My neighbors, however, have to get the information from me. So
Yeah.
that is one of the concerns in the communications committee. I think we are trying to address, you know, whether it be emergency alerts or less than emergency alerts going out and people being able to receive those. So it's on our radar.
Yeah, I tried to do reverse 911 once, and it was on Friday afternoon, and I was told, well, you gotta wait until Monday. Well, that's not gonna work. 'cause
Yeah.
I needed to do it for the weekend going in.
Loud and clear.
If it could be done through something that we're not maintaining the whole separate website.
Well,
When
once
you-
it's set up, you just need to be able
No,
to add
you
things.
do, but you also have to make sure everything is constantly updated, you know, somebody's got to, once you get that website up, it's gotta stay current all the time.
Right.
Which is more time for somebody to actually do that. It's not like you just put it up as a emergency.
What we have though is definitely current, like, you know,
Right.
we update as, you know, as we get stuff. It's not like it's, you know, being held up by any means, it's just getting
Oh,
to
no,
it.
yeah, the one we have is.
And not
if you
everybody-
can find it, is great.
And there's a lot of older people in town that don't have access to, you know, the internet or whatever. They don't know how to use it, they don't know how to get on. Well, how come I didn't know? Well, I don't have the computer, like, what do I, you know? It's like, I don't even have anything to say about that, because there's no other way except by, you know, posting something some way, you know?
Yeah, we have a bunch of vendors that we're looking at, and even the last vendor that we had, they put a special focus on making sure that everything was just 1 or 2 clicks away. You know, each department is 1 or 2 clicks away, so big menus, everything's right up front, and you can get to, you know, the websites that they're showing, you can get to the water department in 1 or 2 clicks.
Well, it's like PFAS
Instead of
removal.
being
We
bad.
needed it yesterday. Where were we?
Yeah, well, there is also the ability on these sites to post multiple alerts on the front page.
Yeah.
So, you know, I mean, there could be a fire department alert, there could be a water
Yeah.
department alert, there can be several alerts on the main page. So it won't be, I mean, you can get to these pages, you know, through minimal clicks or whatnot, but there'll be an alert on the front page if it's something, you know,
So if we
concerning
give
the
you
water
a
and
little
stuff like
time.
that. Yeah, we're all, we're
Like
all
a
working in
day or
the right
two, or maybe
direction.
a week, or,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, we'll see.
10 days.
Yeah.
God, no. I'll have water back by then.
You could know that we don't go home until water's restored. It's not,
I am very appreciative. I know how hard you guys work. I'm just one voice in the crowd though, and there's a lot of other voices out there,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
So we'll try to get that taken care of with, I mean, if James needs to come down, can you?
yeah, I'll read it, and then, like, I've got a whole pile of things. It's,
Alright, on to, is it the tank? Is that next on your
Sure.
list?
I think that's the last thing of yours, isn't it? What do you have?
I think so.
Thank you.
Sorry, we don't usually have other guests that
No
they bring
worries.
extra copies.
No worries.
So one of the things I think we're overdue to talk to you about is the altitude valve project. So what I brought today was just a couple things to show you kind of what we're thinking, so that you can take a look, and then we can make any adjustments to the proposal depending on your feedback, and then present a final one for approval another time. So essentially there are 3 pieces. The first is just our proposal, which is kind of our engineering scope, so to speak, to do the design. It's pretty straightforward. This is just design and bidding. It doesn't include any construction. I think we've typically done those separately. I think we like to define the costs of the construction. Is how we've typically done it with you guys. And then refine our construction services accordingly. One thing I will say is that this is a little bit sub-consultant heavy. So we do have in here a survey, because we're not entirely sure the quality of records for this particular one, and it makes a big difference for us during design, where exactly all the things are. So if we go to the last sheet, we kind of just today, to try to help you visualize what we priced out, we just kind of put together a little figure. And essentially what you have now is those 2 tanks come into this line separately. And in order for them to come through a single altitude valve, we have to bring them together before then. And so we were looking at how we can stage this so that at the very least you always have 1 tank online. And so we think it's definitely doable. assuming that we have these two valves at the tank. Our GIS shows them being on the tank site, but if they're not immediately adjacent to the tank, then one thing we might have to deal with during design is looking at whether tapping sleeve and valves or insertion valves are needed to keep tanks, or because I'm assuming we don't want to drain these tanks just so we can cut in a valve. So I know not all
So there are
communities.
valves in front of the tanks, if
Okay.
that's what you're asking.
Yeah, like right in front of each.
Well, it's not, so there's a vault in front of the 5 million, we opened that up, and there were these two big blacks, but like they were bigger than my hand. None of us were going in there. It turned out the gate was actually outside of the vault, so it's probably 6 feet off of the tank.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
And then the other tank, it's a little further, we had to replace one down inside, I don't know if we put a valve back in, because we had a leaded joint we had to remove in the bottom of the tank. So I don't remember, we can open that vault and look in, but there's a gate outside of that one too, within 10 feet of the tank.
Okay.
So they can both be isolated.
Perfect. So then that answers that question. There shouldn't be any need. We have to just time the cut in, to this I think it's a 16-inch line. Just have to time that so that we don't have disruption in service.
How much additional cost do you think you're picking up to keep both of those tanks online? Or to keep either of those tanks online?
It's fed from 2 directions.
I think since those valves exist, very little.
So as far as the rest of the piping, it's not gonna be in, because like I said, if we had to, and we did the work at the right time of year, could we live off of the Walnut Street tank?
We probably could.
Depending on how long it was.
So that's the same, I was hoping that the altitude valve came after 2 years after October. But we'd see what pressure we do trying to force the tank to fill. I worry about that because we have the steel lines in town that should have been gone a long time ago. And those will be the first to pop. But the tank is fed from 2 sides. It's fed off of the 16 and it's also fed
Right.
off the North Elm. There's nothing in between. You'd have to do an insertion that you could do one.
Well, that's why we're thinking if these valves all exist, we should be able to not have to drain either, but take one offline while we do some of the work, and then once that one is complete, we can switch over to the other. Because you can feed, the larger tank from the 16-inch line, because you already have a valve here at the end. So it'd be very easy to close that, and then you have a valve on this end, right? So this tank is still in service, so we can do everything up to this point where we can essentially drop in a valve here. Then at that point, this can go back online because we've installed, this valve. So we can close this and feed this off this side, and then do whatever tie-ins we need on this side. So you take one side off, you have enough valves to isolate them so you're not draining the tanks, but then stage the work so the other one stays online. Then you switch over, and then you're good to go. Because I think originally we'd come to you with 2 different vaults so that we'd put them between the 2 tanks in the line. And I think, to your point, this works out to be more cost effective, even though it took a little bit more, finagling of sequence of work. It's certainly, I think, less expensive, even with a little extra piping. And since it sounds like we won't need any tapping sleeves or insertion valves, then I think, certainly it's cost effective to go this way versus 2 vaults. So for you guys to review between, now and next time, we have our scope of services, we have a construction estimate for a single vault. So obviously, I didn't think to bring my old one with me, but I know both the construction costs and our estimated engineering costs have reduced since the previous round we gave you.
When you talk about a 2-way altitude valve as opposed to a single one for the fill with a bypass for fire.
Yeah.
What was already approved on this? We went before
I
town
think
meeting.
650. That's the number that comes to mind.
Total design and
Yeah.
construction, like, that
Okay.
sounds like the right number. Which is actually, is under.
Today,
Oh, tomorrow's always another story.
right?
But operationally, lately, you've been able to keep the tanks moving better than they did
So
before.
weirdly, on Saturday, Friday and Sunday on either side, we produced 800,000 gallons of water. On Saturday, we produced 165,000 gallons of water, and the tank cycled 6 feet. I don't know what happened there, but it was a weird coincidence. Usually it's cycling about 5 feet.
It wasn't something with the instrumentation or anything?
No, and it just so happens, however, because part of the forelog is I make the guys turn, when they come in, we're changing how the system runs, that they turn it on and 30 minutes later they go up to the stations because we need readings for the forelog.
Yep.
Our fastest typical time and temperature happens to be within the first hour of run because it's a declining run. So that's why, so we've changed how the system's working, so that's why it just occurred that way.
Okay, that's it for your updates. Any questions for James?
No,
No, thank you, Jim.
I appreciate your time.
We'll see you in 2
I'll plan on
weeks.
seeing you in 2 weeks.
Okay.
The other thing you might
Remember, it'll
hear-
be a Tuesday night, not a Monday.
Yeah.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, that's,
It's after
the Monday's a holiday.
But you might
You
hear.
said that, I just didn't click.
You're gonna see an email from me on, the two VFDs. So they ramp up, which is good, but they don't ramp down, they just dead stall. When they shut off, they're off. So they've gotta come back and reprogram them.
Program thing.
And at that same time, might need to give Mike a nudge to make him put it onto the SCADA. Right now, he has them set to run at 100%, which is fine. But as we go into summer and we see drawdown between the two wells, I might need to vary them. So if he hadn't done it, he just set it up so we could test them. They're testing out fine. You know, the last thing that I see is the fact that they're not ramping down when shut off.
Alright, so it's a program thing. So
Yeah.
has Mike been out there at all since
So
they,
Mike's a busy individual, and
Yeah.
he's been back a few times, but he hasn't tried to program them yet. I don't like to make him mad because he's the only guy
oh,
around.
that's,
Yeah.
okay. Well, because we can do it through the contractor because
Right.
it's work that,
You can say that you want to close out the contract, and you know, I'll
Yeah.
send you an email saying about the thing stalling off. You know,
okay, yeah,
not
do that,
shutting-
and then really I'm gonna just tell Danquist to get him up there and do it.
All right.
Alright, well, have a good night, thank you all.
Yeah.
Thanks, James.
That's all.
Actually, let's see.
If you can afford to
You here for
build
something
3 new
specific?
schools.
No,
right?
Wow. All right, no, 'cause if you were, I was gonna.
we'll address it now.
Address it with you now instead of making you go through, although we're almost done.
Just here as a resident.
It's nice to have that here sometimes.
Look
We
at
don't,
that,
we don't
nice.
get very many.
Yeah.
All right, where did we get then? What did we get? An update on the replacement well?
So as you just heard, the only thing that we've found left to go is that it doesn't shut off. It's supposed to ramp down.
Yes, soft start, soft stop.
Right. And they don't. And when he redoes the SCADA program, he'll stagger them too. Like right now, they just both come on, which is okay, that's a soft start. But when he does it, one will be 45-second delay start behind the other. So you've got a 1.5-minute ramp up time, basically.
Walnut Street tank that,
I haven't got an update yet.
Location.
We're shooting towards warmer weather, and then I'll go down and talk about renting a lift so I can go up and look at it.
Not getting any worse, the leak?
It's not getting, no, it hasn't. We'll start out tightening the flanges and see if that does it, but when I have the lift, I can go up and see where it's actually coming, or
yeah, that's the
beginning
thing.
at.
Till then, you don't know.
Right.
solar?
I didn't have time, but I really know that the money that they talked about basically was this, oh, we just had them here and we let them go. We didn't ask them if there's any money to make the building green, but I'll send them in my
Yeah,
email.
shoot
I'll
an
ask.
email to them and ask. No, that was going kind of a long time with, and that one, that slipped my mind on that one.
Yeah.
So, I remember we talked about that the last meeting. Okay, rates and service fees. The new fees go into effect?
I've posted them up there, so they're in effect. And the other thing, budget meetings are coming up.
Do we have dates yet?
Yeah, we have the dates on the. All right, so it's the 21st and the 22nd. So Wednesday, the 21st is at 7:30, that's with the selectmen. And Thursday, the 22nd is at 7:40, and that's with FinCom. I had to submit the budget already, but it was pretty much, I did up the chemical and the labs. Because the samples he's asked for, that's $4,200 and there's 7 samples. That's just for that specific set.
And you know we're gonna be doing extra sampling.
Yeah, so I
The work that's
added in
coming up.
and added in, and when I was in the lab, they were talking about how they hadn't increased yet, and I'm like, so at some point, they're gonna increase again.
So they have basically what we saw last meeting
Yeah, yes.
with, just with a bump in
Yep.
the.
And then Ed came in with his IT after the fact, one line went way up, and then the other line dropped out, so it was a wash. And then there was something else, you sent me something on that, the KVS?
No, that was Ed Cyro's,
Do
that
we-
one.
Yeah, I don't know what KVS, because I don't have a line for that, I just saw it, and
KDS, that's what we checked, that's how that's the,
a shared cost in somewhere.
yeah, that's how they pay their bills, that's how we check to see what, like, if our vendors have been paid. That's what KBS is.
Because I don't have a line for it.
A line?
Yeah, like with Ed with IT, I have 3 lines to him.
That was from him though, right?
Yeah. It talked about shared, and there was no breakdown, so I couldn't figure it out. It'll pop up at some point.
No, I'm trying to find it.
So then we're coming up on capital too.
What do you need?
Alright, so you know the lawnmower's dead.
Yeah.
That was, I wanna say that was about $7,000 for the one, and then we need a trailer to move it. We borrow the highways, but we have to move when we can move. We borrow it, and then they always want it back because we didn't have time to get to what we needed to. And I get it, because we have to do things when we can. So there's probably another $8,000 for a trailer, because I don't want just an open, flat, $1,500 trailer. I want it enclosed so when we go to a job site, we're not tossing stuff in the backs of the trucks and the backs of the van and the dump truck.
So yeah, so the trailer's not specific just for the.
Right, it's not just for the lawn.
I just
It'll
wanted to
carry the
make
lawnmower.
that clear, because it sounded.
Right, yeah, no, I'll make it clear.
Okay.
But the trailer will probably cost more than a lawnmower.
So 16,000 total.
Yeah, somewhere thereabouts. The excavator trailer. It was bought at the time cheaply. It's minimum sized right at the weight of the excavator, which is 14,000 pounds or 7 ton. We welded it back together numerous times. Somebody ripped the back end off of it once when they borrowed it, when they swung out of our door, ripped our door part too. It's been welded. It's not gonna last that long before the back half of it cracks off. So that's probably about $20,000. But I've gotta run around and get quotes.
What was that one for?
So that's for the excavator.
How old is the existing trailer?
The excavator came after, so it's probably about 15 years old. But it wasn't, it's minimum sized, it's
Yeah, so you're talking about getting something a little bit bigger.
a little, like 10 ton instead of a 7 ton. The excavator is 7 ton, so 10 ton should handle it. It'll be a ramp trailer, so that we're not going up things, because we dig the road when we put the legs down. It sometimes does damage. And then I'd have to do one for the treatment plant, so I'm gonna have to ask him if he's hard and fast on that 10.7. I think that's what the SRF funded us for, 10.7.
Yeah. Yeah, just make, whatever it is we have to put in, it's gotta be in a
Right.
for it, so just double check it with him first.
Because the SRF requires that you be fully funded by the
Yep.
town, irregardless of any grants. I did the numbers, I mean, with the 2 plans of 15, I think it comes out to about $375,000 a year on the budget. I believe at 30 or 40, I forget which one I did, which is not, it's not gonna be that number, it'll be less. We're gonna get money, we already have money towards 1.3 towards the Manley Street plant, so that number's down, and whatever the SRFs give us on top of that, so. They're not budget busters, but listening to them talk about the NEOX system,
Well, hopefully we can come up with a way to not do them IS.
Right.
That is a big chunk. And
Yeah.
And not like it's a little bit of work either. You gotta run that kind of salt.
Right.
Every million gallons.
well, it's not that I didn't like the waste stream part of it.
Yeah. Again, it turns into tight tanks. The tight tanks
Right.
are not optimal to do anything like that.
Right.
That's, you're talking never-ending costs.
Yep,
And it's $1 a gallon now.
yeah, so that's
That could
$9,000.
go out with no control over it on our end, that could
Right.
go up any amount, depending on where they alter.
Yep,
So that's, if we can avoid that, that's, I think, a better.
How much is a new well about?
So we-
The well,
so we replaced the well right there. This one was, I wanna say around 650.
How long would it take for approval
You're talking 2 years.
yeah.
Well, we're not even using this one anyways, right?
So those 2 we're not running because I can't.
Right.
Because of the complaints.
I keep them active, ready to go. Should we get in an emergency situation, then we'd have to publish letters and everything else, but they're ready to go. They're in a ready state.
But long-term, we need the capacity.
Right.
So it's not like we
I
can
need
just-
redundancy and I don't have it. I have Norman Ave down for rehab, so they pulled it out. It was last done in 2018, and not because I just couldn't do it. So when they pulled it apart, the motor was ready to drop the bearing, it was ready to blow apart. So we got to it just in time. I'm gonna have them do well 4, because that hasn't been done in a while either. So once we requalify,
And you've got that in your budget
yeah.
to cover it. We good on the budget?
Yeah, we'll be good.
Questions for him?
So that was it, just the mow, the trailer, and the excavator trailer?
Yeah. I mean, I can put more stuff in if you want.
What about a truck?
I asked a little while ago, I'll ask again. I'm fairly certain by the time we get around to being able to, they won't open the system so you can't even order it or fix a price. I'm betting when it opens back up that the price is gonna have gone up and then we can't
So
do
it
it.
won't be covered.
Right.
But there's no way to tell until,
Yeah, because they won't open the system. I don't know why they want to stick with Fords, but they do. Even though they drive Western Stars, some of their others, like,
hit that. Rules and regulations, anything new?
no, I haven't had time to get to them. It was fun trying to get all those samples out.
No, I mean, it's, the thing with that stuff is if you don't stop what you're doing and do that, then we're holding
Yeah.
Right,
down
that's
the
what
line.
I'm
And if
about.
it can save us a couple million on capital on the treatment plant, and a couple,
Yeah, no, I had the guy on Tuesday, we pulled, say, I had 42 vials sitting on the table, because once you get the labels wet, now you can't figure out what they are, because
All right, you had mentioned you needed for redundancy. I had got a phone call, it was too late to put it on the agenda, so we can't vote on anything on it tonight. But a different consultant is working with Brockton, and they're looking to meet with all the different
so,
communities
so
around.
I'm sitting in some committee now.
Well, not Old Colony.
Yeah, it's Old Town.
This is separate from Old Colony.
You know, they're spending $1.5 million on that. I don't like,
They're looking on that, this one is specifically, I guess, being driven by Brockton, it's all the surrounding communities they're trying to get meetings with. Which makes me suspicious they're looking to do something with Veolia water, because that's the whole deal with the desal plant.
oh yeah,
They've
he's
been-
got
that they've been stuck, so if they were saying just us, but they're talking about potential emergency interconnections, potential water sales is what I was told. If there's no objections, I'll meet with them and just get the, I mean, if nothing else for the due diligence, if it turned out, I know we can't hook up to any of the ones around here, you can't just hook up and go, the
no.
way it's set up, but at least if we can, you know, at least we find out what it might take, if what's available in addition. I had already asked Tater and Howard before about the cost to potentially
Right.
go direct to desal, and that was, even with what they're talking about today, would still be cheaper with what
Yeah.
we're doing. But at least you're working with Old Colony, I'll figure out and I'll report back to you on what they say in these meetings
So
for
you
Brockton.
You figure they're looking for us to hook into them as a redundancy for us?
Well, I think that DEP loves regionalization, and Brockton, I know, would like to do something about using that desal water, as opposed to now what they basically pay for it and run it to waste.
Right.
So if they could get some money for it, then they think they're figuring, find out what everybody around needs, and if there's a use for, as a redundant, as an emergency source, if somebody wants it as a supplemental source, you know, whatever. I think it's real preliminary, so I'm kind of guessing it's the desal water, but that's kind of the only thing that makes sense if they're hitting everybody.
Yeah, some of the communities around Silver Lake were a little aggravated.
How far away is MWRA district, are they?
So that's still, I'm
It
not
ties
sure.
into,
it's
it
still-
ties into Stoughton, but I don't know what capacity they have down that far. Because when that was looked at, and New Bedford was looked at for coming up to Brockton at the same time as the desal plant, because I actually worked on that back then.
20 years ago.
So would that have been that? Might even been long.
Yeah, maybe one.
But yeah, they were looking at that as an alternative from Quinnipiac all the way up to Brockton. I mean, we have no connection points direct, anything we would do would have to build new connection points no matter what. And then you're dealing with the chemistry change of the water. When you turn on Brockton and start putting that water into us, you'd have all kinds of upsets going on. So it's something that'd have to be figured out, but at least, you know, we'll do the due diligence, and if we start getting an idea, so if something like that comes up or gets worse, like the Mayans, we at least have an answer, why we're spending that money, or, you know, maybe why we're gonna do something different, but. All right, so I'll keep in touch with them, and
Yeah.
I'll just report back. Anything else?
So how should I word it for the next agenda, just so it's on
What is MyX, the chemical
Well, it's not a chemical, it's a media.
media?
Yeah, you know, kind of like, so
Yeah.
where this is the advantage, the thing.
Is it an acronym for something?
Just interconnection.
Yeah, so it is, it's for the media itself, it's inside.
Interconnection discussion. That'll work. Anything, Dylan? Communication committee, I can't talk, report.
We met last week and met with another vendor. Still trying to figure out what all the opportunities are with different vendors, interviewing different vendors. This one had a lot of great options for us as opposed to the last one, which was through our existing website. This one, you could select an area and it would send a text to everyone in that area or message.
So then the residents have to opt into it.
They would opt into it, yeah. And they could choose, you know, I want alerts from police and fire and water, and they select what they're interested in.
Yeah.
And then the websites that they had were very user-friendly, ADA compliant, but they haven't told us the price yet, so
Yeah.
we'll get to that.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother meeting.
But yeah, I think we got a couple more vendors to talk to. But there's definitely a lot of technology that we don't have right now in West Bridgewater that would make everyone's life a little bit easier. You know, to send out, you know, select a region in the map and say, hey, we're flushing in your area this Friday. And then you're not getting so many calls on Friday. And things like that.
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely a lot of good that can come from it.
Anything from our guest?
No, thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. It's actually, you know, it's kind of nice somebody from the town actually comes to the meetings and doesn't yell.
Yeah, no.
Been a while.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn if no one has anything else.
Next meeting,
Oh, you already said it.
Tuesday, okay.
Yeah.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, we're done. 6:28.